Virgos, Sun, Moon and Rising. This is your tarot reading for the week ahead. Looks like a really great week. Particularly at the beginning, we start off with the Page of Pentacles. Virgo obviously being an earth sign, and we've got the sign of earth with the pentacles. So starting exactly where you should be, centered, grounded. And there's this real sense with this triptych of cards. We have the Page of Pentacles, then we have the Star card, and then it finishes with the Fool. This real sense of contentment, of this quiet contemplation, not hankering for anything, not feeling as though there's something greatly missing. So I'd really, really embrace that. Obviously, a sense of satisfaction tends to come when we're really living in the here and now, when we're not worrying about what's happened previously, worrying about what's coming up. So really lean into this sense of actually what brings you a quiet sort of pleasure. These aren't grand gestures, these aren't blowouts, these aren't big holidays necessarily, feel free, but this is much more of a deep-seated contentment and satisfaction, which is arguably slightly more valuable, but that really coming through. You know, those days where you just kind of sit there with a cup of tea, or you're reading a book, or you're just feeling really still, you're feeling content, you're not feeling kind of that you need to necessarily do anything. That's the feeling that's really coming through. Any process of reflection, particularly with the Star card, a little bit of soul searching, but this isn't deep inner work necessarily. This is just feeling really in the rhythm of life. Now, I know for many of us, we're moving into the winter months, depending where you are in the world. But there's a lot here about nature as well. And I know sometimes if it's freezing cold or it's a bit drizzly, we want to retreat. But actually, there's an emphasis here around exploration, particularly with the Fool card. But all of these cards really speak to me about nature, about the fecund nature of nature. And just really, sometimes, you know, when we're out in the world, we feel a sense of expansiveness. We feel a sense of freedom, of being unfettered, of, again, sometimes, and this is probably just me, but I love it when it's really windy because I feel like I'm blowing out all the cobwebs, or I love wrapping up in all of those layers and then going out into the forest, even though it's kind of crisp and cold. There's a real sense of wanting to and needing to do that. It's not necessarily a time to be very housebound or very, very inward. It does feel reflective. It does feel calm. There is a call here to spend some alone time. So it's not necessarily the week to, and this is really emphasized in the latter part of the reading, which I'll expand upon in a moment, but it's not necessarily a time for big interactions, conversing with lots of people. There's of all the other zodiac readings that I've done thus far, this feels the most still. This feels the most quiet. This feels the most centered, which is really lovely. A lot of the other readings, and you can go and watch the other videos if you're interested. A lot of the other readings, it feels quite busy. It feels at times quite frenetic or quite manic. Lots of plates to spin, lots of different things going on. And this feels like it's in its own little bubble. And that's quite nice for Virgo, because being an earth sign, sometimes that freneticness or lots of things going on is a bit frustrating, or it kind of pulls us off our center or pulls us off course. So anything that you can do to maintain that and keep that, be in your own little bubble, I think is very worthwhile doing. Now, that may not necessarily mean that you jettison all your responsibilities, you shirk your responsibilities, say, no, I'm not doing that, I'm living in my bubble. But if you can find those moments of quietude, if you can find those kind of peaceful moments, then snatch them, then grab them. If it's a choice between kind of something very busy, something full on, or just being chill, just being at home, just being in your own kind of company, I would choose the latter. I would avoid things like doom scrolling or watching loads of television, too much engagement with technology, because again, sometimes that can be at the counterpoint of being in nature. So in those points of quietude, it's not so much about just watching endless series, binge watching. I would look at activities that are perhaps a little bit more inward, a little less stimulating. I think this is a really, really key point. A really key point, because out of this quietude and this stillness and this centeredness can come some real value. And if you're too distracted, if you're too stimulated by outside sources, that can't really surface, that can't bubble up to the surface. You may also find, just given that we have the Fool card, which is often about being a neophyte, it's starting something new, it's the big adventures. Out of this reflection period may come some understandings and realizations. You want to do something quite unexpected, or something, just completely new, really. And I would embrace that. I wouldn't necessarily question that and think, where's this coming from? I would go, okay, that sounds interesting. So just start. Again, this might relate to new things that you want to start in the new year, new projects, new hobbies, new activities, but just start looking at that. And again, these might fall out of the remit of what you ordinarily do, and I think that that's absolutely fine. It's very likely that new aspects of you are going to want to be explored this week and further afield. This is probably this kind of starting time. Again, with the Page of Pentacles, I always see the page as having a seed and thinking, what could I do with this? Where do I want to invest this, either this money or this time or this resource? So some of these questions coming through, and actually, again, in combination, the Page of Pentacles with the star sign, about understanding that sometimes things take time, and actually thinking about the future, but not in an anxious driven way, not in a planning way, but thinking, actually, what seeds do I want to plant now that will present themselves later on, perhaps in 2025, middle of 2025. And just this understanding that anything worthwhile doing probably needs to be built upon layer by layer, rather than something that needs to be rushed. That's the real thing. The more you can lean into it, doesn't need to be rushed. It can take its time, absolutely fine. And the more assured and I'm going to say self-centered. I don't mean self-centered as egoistic and me. I mean just being centered in the self and not too dragged around by the worldly winds, the better. So although for other people it might seem quite an exciting week and lots going on, and you're there and it's a little bit quieter, don't assume that by comparison it's exciting and dull. This is not about dullness. This is about actually contentment, really. Because at the contrast to this, we have the Five of Wands, the Lord of Strife, and the Knight of Swords. And this feels less around kind of you or internally what's going on for you, but about the external world. And as I mentioned there before, because the external world, and for many other of the zodiac signs, there's quite a lot going on. There's quite a lot of demands. There's a lot of busyness out there. And you might be picking up on that energy, and it's really up to you to keep reminding yourself, no, this is about me centering. This is about me doing things at my own pace, not feeling rushed. So that sense of compare and despair couldn't be more apt here. You may find that other people are trying to slightly rush you, or kind of, come on, why don't you do this? Or come and join us. Or they're trying to pull you away from where you need to be. Some of that might be well-meaning, some of that might not be. But I can just feel this frustration because other people aren't necessarily on the same rhythm as you are, because you are taking this slightly more careful and slower pace. It's that slight freneticness out there might whip you up into a certain fervor that you don't need to be in. So it's whatever you can do to guard yourself against that. Maybe it's about cutting away from reading the news for a week. Maybe it's kind of leaving your phone off the hook, so to speak. I don't think anybody does that anymore, but in that kind of sense, because the more that you're trying to be kind of rushed, and the more that people are kind of offloading, or the more that people are trying to cajole you into something that you don't want to do, the more I can feel frustrated by that, and that could come out a little burst of annoyance or anger. So that's going to be the challenge to kind of navigate. It's a bit like while everybody else is speeding up, we're slowing down. So it's this kind of stretch of these timelines are no longer in sync. So again, because of that, we could feel a bit kind of, am I being a little bit offhand? Am I meant to be speeding up and to kind of keep the pace with everybody else? So because of that, it's just this slight feeling of frustration or annoyance at times. Again, I think that's going to be very passing, but it's really up to you to keep checking in with yourself, and it's reminding yourself, okay, that's what works for them, that's what they need, that's absolutely fine. But for me, I just want to be in my cocoon, I want to be in my bubble for the week ahead. And I think that's absolutely correct and absolutely right. Again, you might find that you're having quite a lot of unsolicited advice this week as well. People wanting to stick their oar in or offer, as I say, pieces of guidance or insights or suggestions that you haven't asked for. So just try and back that off with as much grace and dignity as you can, because there will be temptations to fall into this place, the Knight of Swords, into being rallied or riled up, and that isn't going to prove a useful course of action by any means. So it's really important this week that you don't rush into anything, rush into any decisions, and particularly make any knee-jerk reactions to other people. Again, it's a little bit like if you disturb a dog that's perfectly happy sleeping and then kind of growls at you, I'm talking from personal experience here. Again, it's because it just kind of needs to be left alone. So just watch that tendency that you might have to growl, go away. Just try and keep that slightly under wraps in a certain way. It's like, I'm doing my own thing. Part of this can be circumnavigated just through communication, and just say, look, I'm just having a week off. I'm just trying to, particularly if you're in close proximity with others. But I hope that helps. I hope you find that inspiring, and I shall see you next week. Bye for now.